Teisha Siburim Shel Matzah, V'echad Shel Chametz. So you have piles of chametz and piles of matzah, so it's 9-1. V'ata achbar, so a mouse comes. Again, we've changed it to achbar from cholda. V'shakal, so the achbar took it. V'lo yadina I matzah shakal I chametz shakal. So did he take matzah or did he take chametz? So the psak is hayinu teisha chanios. So that's basically it. I mean, that's again Rashi's calling it the piskei helchus hand. So like that's our whole story. So the achbar, if the achbar took something from the pile and ran away, we don't really care. So Rashi tells us no, the achbar went into the house in front of us, and we don't know if he took chametz and kevin shezachinin shrichas anu liv doich or dilma matzah shako. So since we saw the mouse taken, therefore you have to do a bedika. Or maybe he took matzah. If he took matzah into the house, you don't have to do a bedika. Now here we have roiv or matzah, so we should just go bust to the roiv. Hainu tesha chanios, dekai malan behu lekaimei dechol kavua shenatlo mimokum kavua so ein cholchem bo acher haroiv. Now, if you remember back to what we did in Kosovus, here we have the din of Porish is called a Porish Maruba Porish, something that separates itself from the Roiv, came from the Roiv. And everything that's Kavua, then it's 50-50. So since it's Kavua, it's 50 now. Kavu is anything that's nicker b'makoimoi. So where the mouse took from one of the piles, when the mouse is taken from the pile, it's nicker in the pile, whether it's chametz or it's matzah. But we just don't know which pile he took from. But in the place, so for example, in the 9 chanios, when you take from the shop you're in, you'll know if it's kosher and you'll know if it's treif. So that's called kavua. Elaharehu kemechsa al mechsa v'safek isura lechumra. So that the din here of the Teisha Chanios is that you have to do a bedika. Why do you have to do a bedika? Because kavua kamaksa dummy, and therefore, since it's 50-50, we have to redo the bedika because there's no roiv to go basar. Toisa says it doesn't make sense. Haynu Teisha Chanios. Lefi masha perisha kontras leinin bedika lo nehira. Like Perisha Kontras is saying that what does it mean Haynu Teisha Chanios? He's saying that you have to redo the bedika. That's how Rashi's learning it. In bedika, we have to redo the bedika because of kavul kamaksa dami. Therefore, redo the bedika. Lo nehira leri dehechi maisi raya mitishachan. How can you bring a proof from the 9 shops b'chlal? The havis sveika deraisa. Now, what does it mean that the shops are sveika deraisa? Because what are we dealing with in the case of the shops? The case of the shops is you find a piece of meat. Is the piece of meat kosher? Is a piece of meat treif? Is the iser of treifus? Is the iser treifus derabanan or deraisa? Treif meat, eating treif, eating at McDonald's. Is that deraisa? It's deraisa. So since it's deraisa, therefore, how can we bring from the 9 shops that it's deraisa? Va'azlina l'chumra. Why are you not allowed to eat the meat? Because we go l'chumra, and therefore 50-50. Yeah, it's a suffix. It's a suffix 50-50. Since it's deraisa, we go l'chumra. V'hachas feka derabanan hu. And here is a feka derabanan. Kedaminan b'samach. So samach we say later on that the bedika is derabanan because you've already done bittul. Since you've done bittul, the whole bedika is derabanan. So what Toysus is saying here, that since the whole shaila of bedika, and Rashi here is saying is going on bedika, since the bedika is only a din derabanan, so then we go 50-50, you go lakula. Safek, Rabbanan, lakula. This will be 50-50, Safek to Rabbanan, you go lakula. It's easy. You don't do a bedika again. So why are we saying that you do a bedika? We're saying here you do a bedika again. So it doesn't make any sense to say Maxel told me because it's kavua, therefore you do a bedika. That's the reason not to do a bedika, because it's Rabbanan. And when the Teshachanios is Deraisa. So therefore, according to Tosfos, it's ridiculous that Rashi is saying that it's going on bedika because it's nothing to do with the 9 shops. Now, how will Rashi answer this? Obviously, Rashi thinks it's a good question. Why is Tosfos having to go at Rashi, and what's Rashi going to say back? Now, Tosfos, why is the bedika deraisa going to Rashi? So we had on Beis Amon Aleph that Tosfos says the reason that we do the bedika, even though you've done the bittul, is because you might come to eat it, which is an Issa Rabbanan, it's a Gezeres Rabbanan. Rashi says you're going to be over Bali Roya Bali Matzah. Therefore, Rashi, at least it's a Chashash Deraisa, so it's a bit better. But for Tosfos, the whole thing is a Rabbanan, and therefore going back to that same Maklokas, therefore it pops up here as well. Mihu Ishlaimer Da'iri Kagon Shalo Bittel. So here he's giving an answer according to Rashi, but Rashi doesn't hold that. Even if you mevatel, Rashi will be holding. It's at least has a tzad deraisa of the Bali Roya Bali Matzah, because even if you mevatel it, you might undo the bittel. We had different shitas in Rashi over there, but even if you do a bittel, you still have an issue of a deraisa. So it's at least something to go on for Rashi. It's not mamash and it's a deraisa, because you only might come to do it, etc. But it's at least it's sad to rise to that. Old kasha, the gabe teisha chanios, leke cheskes heter. So when you have this piece of meat doesn't have a chazak of heter. It was treif, because when the cow's alive, it's got the iser of ever min achai. Then you shecht it, and then it's a piece of meat. So there's no chazak of heter on this piece of meat. Even if it was kosher in the kosher butcher, and then it comes out, there's no cheskes kashrus on the meat that's out there. On the bosser, there's no chazak. Aval haka ukma a chazak is boduk. So we have all the houses have been done the bedika, and therefore you see a mouse running in with something. So let's just say, well, we know that yesterday or tonight this house was boduk. It was boduk for chometz, therefore it's chometz free. Now the mouse run into it, besafek, therefore we have safek and I get the chazaka. Let's go on the chazaka and say that it's boduk. Which on the bossa there's nothing to say. Just you find a meat. The meat has no chazaka. The meat's just a piece of meat. Di'ilav hachi. So to had the boduk, the mairi, that the house has to be boduk. Di'ilav hachi peshitza de boy bedika. I mean, if it's not boduk already, then you need to do a bedika. So therefore, a mouse run in with a piece of maybe chametz. Like, who cares? You have to do bedika. When you don't have a mouse, you have to do bedika. Now mouse run in, you have to do bedika. Like it's poshut. V'nira l'rid le'inyan shehevi achbar le'bayis v'nimsa kavoy. So when the achbar goes into the house, and then you have the so how does the kevo ishari la'achila? This is the le'inin shehavi. The achbar brought a piece of chometz into the house, v'nimsa, and then you find it. Kevoy ishari. The question is it mutter to eat it? Ilav. Is it mutter to eat this pig? You go into a boduk house, and then the mouse has brought in some food in there, and now you find a piece of something. You don't know if it's chametz or if it's matzah. Now, yesterday it was boduk, and therefore you have a chazaka that what you're eating is kosher. But now a mouse has brought something in. Now we have a suffix deraisa because you're going to eat chametz. So therefore, the question of the Gemara is a suffix deraisa, just like the suffix chanios. Ve'im timer ki ata achbar v'shakol mahani tziburim, from those. So when he took it from those piles, amai chashiv le kavua. Why is this called kavua? My shana nimsa b'pi achbar mimotza biyad nochri. Why is it different when you find a chametz or an item that's in the mouth of the achbar than in the hand of a goy? Because we see in Gid and Nasha, we asked the Rav that says basar that is hidden from the eye is aser. From nimsa you find it. Nimsa yehalachachar roiv. But if you don't keep your eye on the meat the whole time, then it's aser. This is this idea. Basar and nislam min ayin. Rav says it's aser. Any meat that you're not constantly watching is aser, because maybe it got switched with treif meat, and then we say, but you find meat on the floor. It's go out after the Rav, and we mashani shenimsa biyad nachri. What does nimsa mean? Nimsa means you find it in the hand of a goy. So since you find it in the hand of the goy, that's not like being found in the mouth of a achbar. So finding it in the hand of a goy, that's not called kavu, because we're here the hand of the goy is the whole din of kol haparish meruba parish. You go bust to the roiv. So when it's in the hand of the goy, we go bust to the roiv. But by the mouth of the achbar, we go by kavua. And therefore it's 50-50 safek. V'oimeri.
So when it's coming from the
V'oimeri. The hachamayri k'shere'enu shalakach min kavua. Here we saw the mouse doing his business, whereas there the goy's walking around with a piece of meat. And he said, I got it from one of the shops, but I don't know which one. So since we saw the kavua, therefore our suffix should noile the suffix b'mokum kavius. Because then the noilet of the suffix happened at the point of his kavius. But if we didn't see the mouse, then it's like a perush, and then we go boss of the roiv. So we didn't see the goy taking it. Therefore, that's why it's like boss of the roiv. V'had the parach b'taruvus gavi zevachim shenit arvu b'chatos. So we have zevachim that are mixed up with a chatos that are supposed to die. So if you have, for example, a chatos where the Baal gets a kapara from a different korban, then that korban that he was originally going to get kapara from that wasn't shakted, that goes to die. You can't do anything with it. Or b'shor haniskal, and the shor niskal is going to be stoned. Amay yemotu kulam. So if you get a zevach that gets mixed in, they all have to die. You should mix them all up. You should, and then move them. V'neima called the purish meruba purish, so that you have a mixture, and then why have them all die? Just like mix them all up, make them do a dance, and then one will fall off on the side. And we'll say it's a purish. Afal pisha gavar noile the suffix b'mokum kavius. Therefore, even though the suffix has already been noiled in the kavua, therefore it's kavua. So therefore, why are we asking over here? Let us nichboshu v'nedaihu. A shiny hasam to lo have a kavua gomor. It's not a proper kavua. Sheha isra mit oire beheter, because it's isra and mutter together ve'enu nicker, and therefore it's not nicker, and therefore. This is going to say Isra as you do, but Makoima, so it's not nicker in this. It's not a real kavua because the animals are mixed together. And it's only the Rabbanan that are creating this kavua, because the Raisa lo hashav kavua eila kasher Isra you do, but Makoima. And therefore, when you have a bunch of animals together, you can't tell which is the chatas metos and which is the zevak. And therefore, we also do a gezerah there more because maybe you will take from the kavua mi b'mnisa kaven she'ena isra you do it because the isra isn't known. So, because the acre point here in the Toisvis is that there's a maklokas with Rashi over whether the case here. What's the case here? Rashi says the case is you do a bedika. Since Rashi's holding the bedika is deraisa, therefore 50-50 lechumra, whereas Tosfos says 50-50 lekula, and therefore Tosfos learns that it's the case that you find a piece of chometz or a piece of bread, or that could be matzah, in the house, are you allowed to eat it, and therefore it's an isra deraisa. So, Yodam and Aleph. So, Sabar Echod Shel Chometz Lefinev base bottom. So you have again these piles of chometz and matzah. So here's a chometz pile, and you have two houses in front of it, and both of the houses are checked. They've been checked already. So the cheskas that there's no chometz in them. V'yata achbar v'shakol, and the mouse came and he took from the chometz. V'lo yadin and ilahai al. Which house did he go into? So we got two houses. They're both boduk. For sure, a mouse took from the chometz, and for sure he went into one of the houses. And the din is hayinu shnei shvilin. This is the din of two paths. So the two paths, which we're going to get into here, mahadetanan gave shnei shvilin matzinu le mishpat. We can understand the case from the case of the two paths. Ditana with the Mishnah, two paths. One of them is tamai, one of them is tahor. So what tamai? So there's a kever. There's a grave, is mutal bol rochbo. So it's the entire width of the path has a grave right there. Umamale eskula fills up the whole path. The ain oiver bo shalo yahil. You can't have somebody passing by there that won't be mahil over. He won't be over this mace, over this kever. So just like it's vadai chometz into one of the houses, so to vadai one of the guys is tamei. So there's two paths. One of this tamei, one is tahor, and a guy goes on one of the paths, and then he does the hayrus. So asa taharis is naga b'tahiris achar kach. This asa taharis doesn't make any sense. What do you mean he makes taharis? Rashi says he naga, he touches taharis, so he's dealing in his own taharis. So he has cholin that's tahor, or he has truma that's tahor. So he again cholin that's tahor is just it's a chumrah of keeping it as if it's truma. So he makes the taharis, and then his friend came and he went on the second path and he did taharis. So both of them, so for sure one of them went over the kever. So what's the din? Rabbi Yehuda Oimer im nishlu zeh b'fnei atzmo v'zeh b'fnei atzmo tahor. So if each of them asked by themselves, they're tahor. Again, seemingly here, it shouldn't really make any sense. One of them is for sure tameh, but yet they both come out tahor. So yedoyen hen shebishvil hashahalach zeh lo halach zeh. So whatever path he went down, the other guy didn't go down. So for sure one of them is tamei. If they ask, each one says to a hacham, the suffix by itself is tahor. So each one, his own din, he's a suffix. So he's tahor. Why is he tahor? Ain't based in Yecholin Tamayo Kedagaimelan Safik Tuma Barusha Rabim Svekel tahor. So we have the din, and again, this comes from Soita. The Soita is a Safek Soita is Tame, that we say that she's not allowed to be with her husband unless she drinks the water, because she was in Yichud, and therefore we have a Safek. But that's only in the Rishus Yachid. They have to be in Yichud. If they're not in Yichud, so therefore we don't get this Sveika Tame. So basically the din is that any Safek in the Rishus Rabbim is Tahor, any Safek in the Rishus Yachid is Tame. So the Safek Betuma B'Rishus Rabbin Sveiko Tahor. Therefore, the guy is walking in the path, and since it's the Rishus Rabbim, therefore his Safek is Tahor, and that's the din. So each one has his own din of Safek Tahor. So since it's one din, you're giving one psak. Yesh lanu loimer tamein or tahirin, or afilu or efshel lomer lohem tahirin matem sheharei echad vadai tamei. So you can't say that both of them are tahor, because for sure one of them is tamei. So that's the basic din of going down to shvilim, and that's as l'chayra. Makes sense that even though both of them individually, their own suffix is tahor, when they come together, they can't both be tahor. They can't, because one of them for sure went over. And Rashi again uses the lashon here. When you're giving one psak. Well, b'hoira achas. It's one psak. Rabbi Yossi Omer ben kach uben kach tamein. So Rabbi said whether they come one by one, whether they come after each other, they're tamei. Amar Rava v'itema Rabbi Yochanan. So Rava says, say Rabbi Yochanan, but bas achas, when they come at one time, divrei hakol tamein. So when they come at once, everyone says it's tamei. Then really here, we got to look at this taisus bas achas divrei hakol tamei. But basa, when they come at once, everyone says that they are tamei. Again, this is the halacha here. So when they come at once, divrei hakol tamei. B'zeh achazeh divrei hakol tahirin v'lo nechlu ele b'ba l'sheol elav v'al chavero. So when you come to ask on you and your friend, because you're not both in front of you, so ma tihya al shenenu. What's to be on both of us? Rabbi Yossi says it's like basachas, and afal pisha ein shneihin. Even though they're not both before you, you need one hayra or tameim atem or tahirim atem to say they're both the same. So that's Rabbi Yossi says it's like basachas, and therefore they both have the same din. Rabbi Yehuda metamei lezeh achar safek the bezeh achar. And then that's basically the end of the case. Now we have to look at this taisus here. But basach is very called tamei. When they come at once, everyone says that they're tamei. Taisus says nearer dahinu midrabanan. So Taisus says that really this isn't the correct din. When they both come at the same time, since it's a safek b'rishus harabim, the sveiko is tahor, and we are just making it a derabanan din of that you have a tamei. To me, the raisa filu b'basachas tahirin, because Taisus is saying that the din is the raisa when you both come at the same time, you're tahor. Now, the basic question of this whole thing is that one of them was for sure mahil on the kever. Therefore, how can you say that they're both tohor? How do they get it? If one, so again, each one individually, you have a suffix if you went on the path. Maybe you didn't go on the path, but both of them, one of them went on the path. Therefore, how can it be the case that they are both tohor? How can that be the din? So the Shev Shmaisa. So Kodah B'Shuv is a Ha'go'inim Basrai. So these are the Go'inim, the last Geonim. Sha'ila me Ram, the Kehilas Kodosh Vilna. Achad she'achad sheva behemoths. So they shechted 7 behemoths, 7 animals. Ve'achar kach nimsa ba'achas shenikev beis hakoisis. So they found afterwards, after they did the shechita, the basic koisis is part of the stomach, I believe, and they found a hole in one of the stomachs, and that makes it a treif. V'nit arvu hatreifus bekashrus. And therefore, so one of the stomachs is treif, and the other ones are kosher. But they all get mixed up, so now we don't know which is which. The koidim shenoile de savik nimkor chatziyah shel behema achas becheskes kashrus. So before this whole thing happened and everything got mixed up, we sold half a cow. That half a cow went out, for sure it was cheskes kashrus, it was all shechted, everything was good. We only found out after they sold half the cow, it was kosher. We found that one of the stomachs was treif. We don't know which behema was which, and therefore we don't know if the chetzi that left was part of the treif one or part of the kosher ones. So now, mi nema de gam chetzi yesheni mutter miachar de chetziv hanimkor mutter mitam kol de porish meruba porish. So therefore, now the one that went out, firstly has the cheskes kashrus, and it went out. It was no problem when we sold this because everything was kosher. We only later I found there was a suffix. It was a vadai treifus. We don't know which behema that was in. So the cow that went out, the half that went out, called the purish meruba purish, and since there are 6 kosher and 1 treif, therefore we say it came from the 6 kosher. Therefore, what went out was kosher. Now everything that's left, so we know for sure that this is the other half of the cow that went out. So now we have this question, and we say that can we say, now the one that's inside is Asr. Why is the one that's inside Asr? Because it's from a kavua. So even though you have a roiv of behemoths inside the shop is kosher, since this is kavua, though it's not necessarily nikir b'makoma, you can see here now. You can see that it is if it is, I guess, has the stomach. Is it nikir b'makoma? You can argue the point, but it's kavua in the shop, in the butcher shop, and therefore everything that's inside is kameksa domi, and therefore it's treif. So now we have that the behemoth, if someone comes to buy the other half of the cow, we say it's treif. You can't buy it. But the half that went out already, it's kosher, so you can eat it. So here we have a shaila on the same cow. Can half the cow be kosher and half the cow be treif? Obviously, when you do the shechita is on the whole cow. If you have a treifa in the cow, it's not like the part of the cow that has a treifa is treif and the rest of the cow is kosher. The treif causes the whole cow to be treif, and the kashrus causes the whole cow to be kosher. So now we have a case where you have half the cow being kosher, half the cow being treif. Or do we say, no, since the half that's gone outside is kosher, therefore the half that's inside also has to be kosher, we have to have the same din? Or do you say, since the half that's inside is treif, therefore even though it was sold as kosher, we have to say that the second half is also treif? Now, v'ayin sham ma shekosu b'zeh ha'gaonim sham. So the gaonim say that either has to be all kosher or all treif. V'huvet din zeh b'pri chodesh. So the pri chodesh, it's not going to be a ricker source here. V'kesavala zeh loshone. V'anochi hora sheshom echad mehem lo kiven halacha yafes. So all the gaonim who say that it either has to be all kosher, has to be matching din. You have to have a cow that matches. Can't have half kosher, half treif. It's ridiculous. So it says the pri chodesh none of them got the halacha properly, because everything that goes al ta'uta shekatav hataz, they're all going after just like what the Taz made a mistake. Kivish echad eino bedin. So you have one sheep. It can't be that half of it is mutter and half of it is osir. That's what the Taz writes. And obviously, the Taz is not a geon. The geonic comes before. If it's the geon in Basrai, seemingly would be at the end of the geonic period, which is before the Rishonim. So it's not actually following the Taz, but the Taz says this idea: you can't have half a lamb that's kosher. Some of it's kosher, some of it's treif. That's ridiculous. That says the Taz. The Bri Chodesh says it's tos, and therefore those chachamim, some of them osir it, say the whole cow is treif. Hakol umaksam matermakol. And some say no, the whole thing is kosher. So if it's all treif, the bit that stays behind the kavua is machriya on what's gone outside the shop and makes it treif. Or you say that the kosher that's gone outside the shop is machriya what's inside the shop and says it's kosher. For kavar kasavti bepanim shezeh tos gomor. It's a complete mistake to say you can't have biad taz. The Taz making a mistake. If you had kol oimrim kain. Everyone who says you can't have 50-50, no, that's ridiculous. The kain ha minhag poshut, and also the minhag is obvious. Af because achad, you can be matir what you have already sold, and it's pirush, and therefore has a din, it chals on what goes outside the shop as kosher. V'la asur ma shenishar b'chanut she'adayin lo pirush, because it's still in the state of kavur. It's mixed in the mixture, and therefore it is a din, and that's also. So therefore you're also half the cow, and because that's what the din is. God made this din of kol purish mubapurish. God made a din of kavua, and therefore that's how it works. And therefore you have half a cow that's kosher, half a cow that's not kosher. But kol shira chachamim kachu. That's how chachamim act. That's the whole din. Anyone who doesn't teach this, lo yada be'isr v'heter ben yamin and l'smolo. Anyone who doesn't teach this way, he doesn't know an Isser and Heter between his right and his left. Ad ken l'shoinai ha pri chodosh. Now, this pri chodosh, therefore, will give us a way, an entry into the state Shavilim, that, as Tosis is saying, that you have the two people that a deraisa, even babas achas, that both tohar. Because that's the din. One guy has a din of Safek tohar, Sveika b'shus rabim tahor. The other guy's a din of Sveika b'shus rabim tahor. How can they both be tahor? So then, in the lashon of the Pri Chodosh, that's kol sher chachamim kach. And anyone who doesn't say this, they don't know. So you have half is whatever. Each person has his own din, and I don't care if it's a stira. I don't care if it causes problems. It's that's what it is. Now the Shef Shmali continues. The prach is ruba. And then Shapirish lo mahani elu legabe atzmo. So the din itself, it was only by itself of valo lachaticha habudecha, but not for the other half. And that's basically the din of the pre chodosh. Aval kan shenolid safek treifus b'chol behemus vasfekas atzmius b'chol behemus. So since you have the suffix comes in the treifus of all the behemoths, and the suffix itself is all the behema, the whole behema. Ein sveiku shachatziya nishar b'chanos machmas chetzav sheperush elu sveiku machmas atzmo in kasher or treifa. So the whole suffix is whether it's kosher or treifa. Mishum hachi afagav the ikaruba b'chetzi sheperush. Even though you have the roiv of the chetzi sheperush, ein haroiv mahani ele negdoi v'lo neged kula. So it only helps. So that roiv only helps against it, but not for all of it. The imkain masha huter alidei roiv huter v'hashar b'sveiko dok. So again, this is just the basic din. That the psak din is what it chals on, and not the other stuff. So aval. So here neither did dan. The Safak Atzmius im Kasher im Treifa b'chol behema hi b'chol chelek v'chelek. So every chelek of the behema has its own din of kosher v'treif. L'chein einu machriya haroiv shemixatzu shapiris leheter shenishar kevin demixah hanishar gam kain Safak machmus machus atzmo. V'chol zeh l'das pri chodesh. So that's basically the first shita, the pri chodesh here. That's saying that everything has its own din, and therefore, you can have everyone being tahor, even the guy who goes over. Even it can't be. You're like making each psak is a steer to each other, but that doesn't matter. That's how the psak works. But now the Sheish Mana continues that Achar Ian, I see the Divra Hameterim Hakol Gam Chelek Anisha B'chanos Kavua. So he changes his din and he goes off from what the Pri Chodosh was saying, and he says that he goes now against the Pri Chodosh and goes for a different shita, the Sheish Mana himself. El Danim Kaimalan Command Amor Man de Makshir Ba Makshir Babito. So we had the whole case in Ksuvas, where we have that the cheskas of the mother helps for the cheskas ha'em. Why? Because it's all one kashrus. The kashrus of the mother helping for the aim. Why don't we say the mother's kosher and the bas isn't? No, because we poskin that it's all one kashrus. To have it rabbanon. So here the Shesmat is, it's not just a din to rabbanon that you can help, but even in deraisa, the heter will help for the whole heter. So Bekitzer in the end, Val Heicha Demoter Vadai Machria Hasafak Leo Kamoso. So you can go through the whole thing, but basically he brings the Pri Chodesh where we say that each one has its own chelek and each one has its own din b'fnei atzmo, and then he says at the end that he goes like the ones proving it from Kesuvos, that once you have a kosher, that kosher will help for the whole thing. So heicha de mutter vadai, you'll be machriya suffix to be like it, so that you have a vadai kol purush meruba purush. Well, that din will help the suffix of the behemoth that's inside and make it all kosher. So we have a look at the Kubut Shurim, Yud Beis here. So he's going to go against the Pri Chodesh. So if he's near in chazaka, the ena b'toris birur klal. So when you have a chazaka, there's a difference between a chazaka and a birur, because a chazaka is not in the birur. So when you have a roiv is a birur and a chazaka is not a birur. So that's basically what the shita here of the Kubut Shurim, how he's going to kind of answer this kind of stira of both of them are tahor. And he says it's not really a stira, because a chazaka is not a birur. Chazaka is how do you act. So again, a woman who comes into town and you don't know who she is, she's a cheskes penuya, or you know that she's married. We don't know if she is a chazaka. It's not a birur. She's a chazaka that we knew one time that she was married. Therefore, she's a cheskes that she's married. We don't know anything about it. It's not a birur. But a roiv, he's saying, is actually a birur. So if it's a birur, that means it's telling me what the din is. It's telling me this is how it is. So b'kitzer, you can have two chazakas against each other, because each chazak is not telling you what it is. It's just telling you how to act. But you can't have two roivs going against each other, because then you have two psaks going against each other. Chazak is not a psak. Chazaka is not a birur. Chazaka is just telling you how to act, whereas the roiv is giving you a birur, which will lead to a psak, and then if you can't have two psaks contradicting each other. Therefore, we go back to our case. Here, they're in their cheskes tahor, and therefore that we keep them in the cheskes tahor, and therefore they don't go against each other. Therefore, because it's not saying a roiv, we're not being machriya what their din is. We're just saying how to act. So therefore, they keep their chazakas, and they're not contradicting each other. But when it comes to a roiv or something else, so the Pri Chodesh will have the roiv, the case of the behemoth. He says, the roiv. It's not, you can't, he says, you can have the roiv being going against each other, because each chelik gets its own din. But here the Kubut Shurim is saying that if it's a roiv, it has to be for everything. You can't have a stira in a din for roiv, but if it's a stira in the din of chazaka, you can. So since the chazaka is not in the Torah's birur klal, lo mahani b'mokim te be'inim vadai, it doesn't help when you need a vadai, v'lo safak and a fila the das toisvus, So you go call the porish gam gavi meiser hainus farley the gam kol porish maruba havi betoris birur. So therefore call a porish, it's in the toiris of birur. Since it's in the toiris of birur, so therefore you can't have betarti desasri. So leinis exvega the lo mahani betarti desasri ulai gavi chazaka mahanya gam betarti desasri. So you see here by chazaka you can have a tarti desasri. It's no problem because chazaka is not a birur. Here we go, just like Shnei Shavilin, Ubishtei Kita Edim. To Kamalam, Karavuna, the Hare Ruba Adif Nechazaka. So since we are the Tarti Desasri by the case, so the two guys, you say that they're both Deraisa, they're both Tahor. So therefore they're Tarti Desasri, you can't have them both. Both of them, they contradict each other. If you're Tahor, then he's Tama. If he's Tahor, then he's Tama. You can't be both be Tahor. Rather, because we're dealing with chazakas, we can have a tarti desasri, and that's the tarti desasri ein lechelech acharav. Aval chazaka the eina metoris birur ela the gezer sekosov he dein safek moisim medivadai v'lezem ahani gam betarti desasri. So therefore, here we have he's explaining again. The Kuba Sherman is explaining the stira, not like the pre-chodesh. The pre-chodesh will explain the stira. Each guy gets his own din. I don't care if it contradicts. Half of the behem is kosher, half of the behem is treif. That's how it works. And the Kuba Sherman is saying, no, when you have a birur, so therefore the kubitz will let's say poskin in the case of the cow where half goes outside, he'll go like the Shev Smaisa who disagrees with the Pri Chodosh, but still by the Shavilin everyone agrees, like Tosis is saying here, that afilu basachas they're all tohor midoraisa. So when the mouse takes the chometz and it is a chazaka of kashrus, I'm not saying the house is kosher, but it has a chazak of kashrus, because the chazak is not a beer, it's not a roiv. So therefore, I say they both are in the cheskas of kashrus, even though the mouse went in. But I don't care. Like so what? So basically, in the case of so again, Toisus will be saying it's just a din to rabbanon to protect from the tahor or whatever. But you could argue that since the din of the chometz is the bedika itself is a din rabbanon, then maybe even there's then everyone will hold that both in the cheskas kashrus, and therefore you don't need to do a bedika on either of them because they're in the chazaka, and therefore the kuvashurim will say that even though you have a stira in the chazaka, that's okay because I'm not poskening that this house is kosher. I'm saying that as a cheskas has a chazaka, it's got no chometz in it, and therefore both houses can have that chazaka because I'm not poskening that it doesn't have chometz. I'm saying it has a chazaka of that. When you have a roiv, you're saying that roiv is telling me what the mitzias is, and that therefore you can't have a stira in the mitzias, and therefore when it has a roiv, you can't have when it has to be. But when it comes to the chazaka, I'm not saying what the mitzias is. I'm just saying it's a chazaka. But again, the Pri Chodesh will disagree with all that and say, I don't care. Each one has its own psak. V'zo. So the Hatanan, this is going on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. We're asking. Basically, we're saying that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make gezeras and the Rabbanan do. So Vatanan. Lo yikav adam sheshver shel beitza. You can't make a perforation, make holes in a eggshell. The yimalena, and fill it up with oil. The yitanena b'tzadanir, and put it on the side of the candle. So the basic idea is that you have the candle with the oil burning on Shabbos, and when the candle in the oil runs out, then the candle will run out. So you set up a system of where you have like this egg full of oil dripping into your candle, giving it extra fuel. That's basically the what's going on here. It's giving the extra oil into the candle so it keeps on going the whole of Shabbos. So that it drips into it, and even if it's of cheres. So what exactly is the isser here? Why can't you do this? So Rashi, tipus dakut, that it drips down a little bit, even if it's of cheres. That's shoferes. So it's not from an egg, that it's from cheres, and therefore it's muse. It's disgusting. Afilu hachi aser. Even so, then it's aser. Dilma ati lemicha minei. Maybe he'll come to take from us. But Tanya hanoisen shemen lener chayiv misham mavir. So Rashi clearly saying that if you give oil into the ner, you're chayiv b'kav mavir. And then if you take from the oil, is chayiv misham mechabe. So when you remove it, then it's mechabe. So again, this is why driving on Shabbos is asur. If you put shemen into the ner, you have a ner, and it's going to last for an hour. You pour more oil in, then it'll last for more. So you're chayiv mishum mevair. That's the isur deraisa of mevair. And then but if someone who takes from it, if you remove the oil from the ner, chayiv mishum mechabe. So they're all isuri deraisas. No problem. And if you take, the gezerah is that if you do it, you might come to take from the oil. If you do take from the oil, then that will be mechabe deraisa, or if you add to the oil, then it would be mavir deraisa. So here we have, so Rashi holds that here you have an isur deraisa here of the ner. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda says that we don't make a gezerah. It doesn't. Again, that's only that you can't have this cup there, but to take from it or whatever. So also according to Rabbi Yehuda, but we don't make the gezerah. So here we see. So basically the question of the Gemara is that why is Rabbi Yehuda not making gezerahs where the Rabbanan are making gezerahs, and Hasam Mishum Chumer to Shabbos Mavdil Badli. So because of Shabbos, people will stay away. According to Rabbi Yehuda, people will stay away from it. But then we ram Shabbos to Shabbos. Is that really true according to Rabbi Yehuda? Titania Chevel Deli Shenifsak. So you have a rope, and it breaks, and it was attached to a bucket that you bring water up from a well. Don't tie it up. You can't use a kesher. You have to use an unvoid. You have to use this the slip knot. Rabbi Yehuda oimer kairech alav pundak or pesuka b'vad shelo nevel. So he says that you can wrap things around it, but you can't have it. You can't actually make that aniva. So you have like a money belt is the punda, or the paska is like a ritzui. So you basically you wrap things around it, but you can't make this aniva according to the slipknot Rabbi Yehuda holds. So here we really have a machlokas as to what is a maisa uman, or what is a maisa. Should have a kesher shel kaima. See Rashi here. Kesher shel kaima, says Rashi, is an isur deraisa. Elo envoy. Rather, it's a velokas rinen aniva atu kashira. So here we have kashira is the deraisa, and there we have the gezerah for a deraisa din. And here gezerah misham kashira hoel va'oisik bakach. So you can't make an aniva a gezerah because of the kashera, because the aniva is not the kashera. It's a Rashi's holding here that it's just, so don't make an aniva. That's a gezerah because of kashera. Yeah, so the kashera is isur deraisa. So we're not making a gezerah for the aniva. Now this all fits well because the aniva. The aniva is not a deraisa, and the kashira is a deraisa. So Rabbi Yehuda, it's a kasha. Why does he not? Here he's making a gezerah. So he said, don't make the. So Rabbi Yehuda says, don't make an aniva. You might come to do the deraisa of the kashira because it's a shel kaima, says Rashi. You saw the shel kaima. That's why he says that it's an isur deraisa. It's going to be important here. Have a kesher shel kaima. So it's a kaima, therefore it's a deraisa. And then for the aniva, we're making a gezerah. Maybe you'll come to do a deraisa. But up here, Rabbi Yehuda didn't make a gezerah. Maybe you'll come to do a deraisa. Okay, so this basically all works very nicely according to Rashi, and that's the sugya. Now, problems begin if we have a look at the Rambam. The Rambam disagrees with Rashi. Lo yiten adam kli menukav melo shemen. Don't bring the kli that menukav without shemen al pi haner, That's all the same. It's just bringing the Gemara. But look, don't finish the plate and give it beside the nair. And put the Rosh Batil the Tukum shows that it brings it. This is all the same, right? Rashi agrees. Maybe you come from the shemen. The nair isn't discussing. You might take it. The Asr lehinos b'Shabbos min Hashem sholek ve'filu kosva nair ve'filu netef min a nair. Why? Mipnei shehu muksa machmas isur. If you put it together, it's a shemen on the nair b'sid, then it's mutter. So why does Rambam say that you can't take the oil from the kli? This is the deraisa of mipnei shehu muksa. So Rambam holds here that the whole beginning, this whole oil thing, the whole din is muksa. So therefore he holds that the Reisha in our Gemara is the Rabbanan. So here the Shemen, this is all the Rabbanan. So then if we go into, so therefore why are we not? Then it's Poshet here in the second half. Why? Because the Rebbe Yehuda will hold that there's a gezerah because it's deraisa, and up here he holds there won't be a gezerah because it's only the Rabban, it's only muksa. Since it's only muksa, we're not going to make a gezerah. So for the whole Gemara is not going to make any sense according to the Rambam and those who hold like the Rambam. Here we have basically Tosfos, not here. Tosfos I think in Beitza he holds like the Rambam that it's a derabanan here, and Rashi and the Rosh hold that it's deraisa. So therefore, the Gemara doesn't make sense by the Rambam. Again, why does the Gemara not make sense? Here, Rebbe Yehuda does not make a gezerah with the Beitza. Rebbe Yehuda matir. You're allowed. You're allowed to do this whole thing. So we'll say there he's matir because Rebbe Yehuda is not goizer because the worst thing that can happen is muksa, which is the rabbanon. So he's not goizer for rabbanons. You can't rami Shabbos to Shabbos because here I'll tell you why. Rebbe Yehuda holds don't make a niva because a kashira is an issa deraisa, and therefore since it's an issa deraisa, therefore that's why he makes a gezerah. So there's no kasha at all. So for the Rambam, the Gemara just doesn't make sense. Now, good for us, it does make sense because the Rambam's shita, the Rambam has a maklokas with Rashi in what again? What do we say? To have a kesher shel kaima. The Rambam doesn't hold that that's deraisa. Rambam holds that only a kesher shel uman is deraisa. Since the here Rashi said that Rambam's hold this isn't a kesher shel. Rambam holds this isn't in the seifa. It's not a kesher shel uman. Since it's not a kesher shel uman, therefore it's a derabanan here, and therefore at the end here we'll have a vashlo yaniva. It's a gezerah on a derabanan anyway, or all the same gezerah. So therefore the Gemara goes well for the Rambam anyway because he has a whole different shita in tying. Now, coming back to, we have basically a whole din here of what's the maklokus between Rashi and the Rosh and Tosfos and the Rambam as to when you're taking away. Again, the din is that you have oil in a kli and that the candle is burning the oil. Then if you take some of the oil away, it will end quicker. So Tosfos calls it a gorum kiboy, that it's a causation of kiboy. It's not kiboy mamish. It's not the issa deraisa of kiboy. It's just a gorum kiboy, which is not a rabbanon anyway. It's not like it's mutter to do it, but he holds that it's only an issa. You're causing it to go out. So if it has an hour in it, and you take out half an hour, you didn't put the candle out. Obviously, if you snuff the candle, so that would be you put out the candle, it's burning now, and then you stop it burning. But if it's going to last for half an hour, and for an hour, and now you only make it burn for half an hour because you take out some of the oil, that's a goyim kibbutz. You're causing it to go out, and then just like in Shabbos, where if there's a fire, you can surround it with water buckets, and if you heat, then as the fire reaches the water buckets, the water then explodes and puts out the fire. That's not kiboy, it's gorim kiboy. Again, it's a rabbanon, but in that case of the fire, the rabbanon were matir of a place of hefsed. So here we have the maklokas that Rashi and the Rosh hold that taking out the oil is not gorim kiboy, it's kiboy mamish. It's a deraisa of the Rambam and the Rosh. Rambam and Tosfos hold there's gorim kiboy, and therefore it's not an iser deraisa.